The crystal chandelier glittered above the white tablecloth as waiters in crisp black uniforms circled with silver trays of appetizers. Richardson's was Boston's most exclusive restaurant, the kind of place where reservations were hereditary and the menu didn't list prices. I adjusted my tie nervously, feeling like an imposter despite my carefully tailored suit. Across from me, Sophie smiled encouragingly, reaching under the table to squeeze my hand. We'd been dating for 2 years, but this was my first formal introduction to her extended family. Her father, Gregory Davidson, sat at the head of the table, occasionally checking his Patek Philippe watch as if our dinner was cutting into more important engagements. "So, Michael," he began after the sommelier had poured an expensive Bordeaux for everyone except my parents, who had requested water. "Sophia tells me you're a teacher?" He pronounced the word as if describing an exotic disease. "Yes, sir. High school physics at Westridge Academy." "Admirable," he nodded, not looking admirable at all. "Starting salary for teachers these days is what, 40,000? 47 actually," I corrected politely, "plus summers for research." Gregory exchanged glances with his brother Charles, a hedge fund manager whose Ferrari was probably being valeted outside. "Research. I see." My parents sat quietly across the table. Dad in his dependable navy suit that he wore to church and special occasions, Mom in a simple dress she'd bought on sale at Macy's. They looked uncomfortable but dignified, determined to make a good impression despite the obvious wealth disparity. "And your family business is?" Gregory turned to my father, eyebrows raised. "Robert owns a hardware store," my mother answered proudly. "Callahan's Hardware in Worcester. It's been in the family for 3 generations." Charles nearly choked on his wine. "A hardware store. Quaint. Very entrepreneurial," added Gregory's wife Victoria, her diamond earrings catching the light as she tilted her head condescendingly. I felt heat rising in my face, but Sophia jumped in. "Michael's father gives incredible advice. He helped us fix up our apartment last summer." "I'm sure he did," Gregory nodded, signaling for more wine. "Though I imagine you'll be moving somewhere more suitable once you're married. Perhaps that high-rise development near the financial district?" "I know the developer." "We're happy where we are," Sophia replied firmly. We'd had this conversation before. Her parents couldn't understand why their Stanford-educated daughter chose to live in a modest apartment on a teacher's salary when she could easily join her father's investment firm. "So, Mr. Callahan," Charles leaned forward, swirling his wine, "do you find that people still shop at local hardware stores? With the big box retailers everywhere these days." My father smiled mildly. "We do all right. Our customers appreciate personal service and expertise." "I'll bet they do," Gregory chuckled. "Though I can't imagine the margins are anything to write home about." Victoria touched her pearl necklace delicately. "Do you handle the accounting yourself, or?" "My wife manages the books," Dad replied, nodding toward Mom. "Sarah has always had a head for numbers." "How resourceful," Victoria smiled thinly, "keeping it all in the family." As the appetizers arrived, Sophia's cousin Bradley, fresh from his MBA at Wharton, decided to join in. "A teacher's salary in Boston. How do you even survive?" The table erupted in laughter, and I felt Sophia's hand tighten around mine under the tablecloth. My parents exchanged a glance but said nothing. "We manage just fine," I said evenly. "Oh, I'm sure you manage," Gregory chuckled, making air quotes. "But marriage is expensive, and children even more so." Sophia was raised with certain standards. "Dad," Sophia warned, but Gregory waved her off. "It's a legitimate concern, princess. Michael seems like a wonderful young man, but practical matters matter. The Davidsons have certain financial expectations." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I would have ignored it, but the screen showed my father's office number, strange for a Friday evening. "I'm sorry, I should take this. It might be important." I excused myself and stepped away from the table. "Michael? It's Dad. Everything okay?" "Yes, but I need to speak with you and Mr. Davidson. Something's come up with his loan application." I frowned, confused. "His what?" "His loan application. To the foundation. Could you put me on speaker when you get back to the table?" Sure, Dad." When I returned, the conversation had moved on to Bradley's new position at Goldman Sachs. I cleared my throat. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but my father needs to speak with Mr. Davidson. About a loan application." Gregory's fork clattered against his plate. What loan application? He asked me to put him on speaker, I said, still confused. I set my phone in the center of the table and pressed the speaker button. Mr. Davidson, Robert Callahan here. I apologize for interrupting your dinner. Gregory straightened his tie, composing himself. Callahan, what's this about a loan application? There must be some mistake. No mistake, sir. I'm calling about Davidson Development's application to the Callahan Foundation for the Downtown Revitalization Project. $50 million, if I recall correctly. The table went silent. Charles froze with his wine glass halfway to his lips. What? Gregory stammered, color draining from his face. The board just approved it unanimously. I wanted to let you know right away since you marked it urgent. Shall I have the funds transferred Monday morning, or would you prefer immediate processing? There'd be a small expediting fee, of course. Gregory stared at the phone, then at my father across the table, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. You're Robert Callahan, of the Callahan Foundation. My father nodded simply. Yes, though I prefer Bob in social settings. Victoria's hand flew to her pearls. The Callahan Foundation that funded the new wing at Mass General? That owns half the waterfront. 30% of the waterfront, my mother corrected gently. We've diversified in recent years. I sat frozen, as confused as everyone else at the table. The Callahan Foundation. My parents had never mentioned any foundation. Mr. Davidson. My father's voice continued from the speaker. About that transfer. Gregory swallowed hard. Monday is fine, Mr. Callahan. Thank you. Excellent. We can discuss details at the board reception next week. Sarah and I look forward to seeing you there. Enjoy your dinner. The call ended, leaving an awkward silence broken only by the ambient restaurant noise around us. Charles was the first to recover, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cough. Well, Robert, you've been holding out on us. My father took a sip of water. Not at all. You simply never asked about the foundation. We like to keep the hardware store as our public face. Keeps us grounded. The hardware store is a cover? Bradley asked incredulously. Not a cover, my mother clarified. It's where Robert's grandfather started. We maintain it out of respect for our roots and because we believe in honest work. The foundation grew from those principles. I stared at my parents, strangers suddenly in familiar faces. Why did you ever tell me? Mom reached across to touch my hand. We wanted you to find your own way without the burden of the family name. You chose teaching because you love it, not because you were rebelling against or conforming to family expectations. Gregory had gone from pale to flushed. The Callahan Foundation assets are, what exactly? Last quarter. Just under $12 billion, my mother replied matter-of-factly. We've had a good year. Victoria nearly dropped her fork. Billion? With a B? Philanthropy has been very good to us, Dad said mildly. Though we find that how you give matters more than how much. Gregory turned to me, his expression completely transformed. Michael, I had no idea. Please accept my apologies for any misunderstanding earlier. No apology necessary, I replied automatically, still processing this revelation. Sophia was staring at me, her expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was shocked, amused, or angry that I'd never shared this information I myself hadn't known. If you'll excuse us, she said suddenly, standing and taking my hand. Michael and I need a moment. She led me to a quiet alcove near the restaurant's entrance, away from prying eyes and ears. Did you know? She demanded immediately. Sophia, I swear I had no idea. The hardware store, our house in Worcester, everything has always been solidly middle class. Comfortable but modest. She searched my face, then burst out laughing. Oh my God, your father is incredible. Did you see Dad's face? I thought he was going to swallow his tongue. Her reaction broke the tension, and I found myself laughing too. I'm still in shock. $12 billion? My allowance growing up was $20 a week, and I had to mow the lawn for that. She grew serious, taking both my hands in hers. Why do you think they kept it from you? I thought about it, remembering countless childhood lessons about the value of hard work, the importance of earning respect rather than buying it, the responsibility that came with privilege. I think they wanted me to understand the value of things that money can't buy, to know who I was apart from wealth or status. And who are you, Michael Callahan? Sophia asked softly. The same person I was 20 minutes ago. A physics teacher who loves explaining how the universe works. The guy who fell in love with a brilliant woman who chose a meaningful career over a corner office in her father's company. I hesitated. Does this change anything for you? She shook her head firmly. Not a thing. Though I admit I'm enjoying watching my family squirm after the way they treated your parents. When we returned to the table, the dynamic had shifted dramatically. Gregory was engaged in animated conversation with my father about community development initiatives. Victoria was showing my mother pictures of her charity committee's recent gala, while Charles and Bradley listened attentively to every word my parents spoke. As we took our seats, Gregory raised his glass. A toast to Michael and Sophia, and to new family connections that promised to be enlightening. The evening continued with newfound warmth, though I noticed my parents remained exactly as they had been, polite, unpretentious, and quietly dignified. They answered questions about the foundation's work without boasting, deflected inquiries about their personal wealth, and consistently steered conversations toward community impact rather than financial returns. After dessert, as we waited for the valet to bring around our cars, my father pulled me aside. Son, I owe you an explanation. You think, I replied, but without anger. He smiled apologetically. Your grandfather built something remarkable from that little hardware store, not just a business, but a philosophy about wealth and responsibility. When he established the foundation, he was clear about its purpose: to do good quietly, without seeking recognition or power. So you let me believe we were just ordinary? There's no such thing as just ordinary, Michael. Every person has value independent of their bank account. We wanted you to know your own worth before you knew your inheritance. And when were you planning to tell me? After the wedding, actually. We have a whole presentation prepared, he chuckled. Though I admit, I accelerated the timeline a bit tonight. I couldn't sit there and watch that man dismiss you and your mother. I shook my head, amazed. All these years, I've been applying for scholarships, working summer jobs, budgeting carefully. And those experiences shaped you into someone who understands the value of education, hard work, and financial responsibility. Would you trade that understanding for a childhood of privilege? Before I could answer, the Davidson family approached, led by Gregory with an entirely new demeanor. Robert, Sarah, we'd love to have you over to the house soon. Perhaps next weekend. A small gathering, just family. That sounds lovely, my mother replied graciously. Though we'd be equally happy to host you at our home in Worcester. It's modest, but the garden is beautiful this time of year. Victoria, who had probably never set foot in a suburb like Worcester in her life, nodded enthusiastically. We'd be delighted. Wouldn't we, Gregory? As we said our goodbyes, Sophia squeezed my hand and whispered, "Your parents are amazing." They really are, I agreed, watching as they climbed into their 10-year-old Volvo. A car they clearly could have replaced with a fleet of luxury vehicles at any time. On the drive home, I called my parents on speakerphone so Sophia could hear. So, $12 billion? I asked without preamble. My mother laughed. 11.8 technically, and most of it is in the foundation, committed to various causes. But still, I was still struggling to reconcile this new reality with my understanding of my family. Michael, my father said gently, nothing important has changed. We're still the same people with the same values. The only difference is that now you understand the responsibility that will eventually be yours. The hardware store is a profitable small business that employs 15 people and serves a community that would otherwise have to drive 20 minutes to a big box store. It matters, son. Sophia leaned toward the phone. Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, I just want to say, thank you for raising someone who chose to teach because he loves it, not because he had to. We're the ones who should be thanking you, Sophia, my mother replied warmly, for loving our son when all you knew was that he was a teacher from a family that owned a hardware store. After we hung up, Sophia and I drove in contemplative silence for a while. Does it bother you? I finally asked. That I never knew. That I can't even claim I was rejecting wealth on principle. I just had no idea it existed. She considered this. What bothers me is thinking about how differently my family would have treated you if they'd known from the beginning. How differently they might have treated someone else in your position who didn't happen to have a secret fortune. Me too, I admitted. So what now? Do you quit teaching and join the family foundation? I shook my head firmly. Absolutely not. I love my job. Though I might talk to my parents about establishing a scholarship fund for students interested in STEM education. She smiled. That sounds perfect. Later that night, after dropping Sophia at her apartment, I drove to my own modest one-bedroom, seeing it through new eyes. I could move tomorrow to a penthouse, buy a sports car, live a completely different life. The possibility was dizzying. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and called my parents again. I need to understand everything, I told them. The foundation, the responsibilities, the expectations. If I'm going to be part of this legacy, I want to do it right. My father's voice was warm with pride. That's exactly what we hoped you'd say. Come home this weekend, we'll start at the beginning. And Sophia. Bring her, my mother said without hesitation. She's family now. As I hung up, I realized that while my understanding of my family had been upended, the core truths remained unchanged. My parents had always valued character over wealth, service over status, and genuine connections over social climbing. The revelation of our financial situation didn't change who we were. It just added responsibility to the values they'd already instilled. 3 months later, Sophia and I were married in a ceremony that balanced elegance with meaning. The Davidson family, still slightly shell-shocked by the revelation of the Callahan fortune, had become noticeably more humble. Gregory had even started showing genuine interest in community development beyond its profit potential. At the reception, my father clinked his glass for the traditional toast. Guests fell silent, many of them still adjusting to the idea that unassuming Robert Callahan from a hardware store was actually Robert Callahan of the Callahan Foundation. When Sarah and I decided to keep our foundation work separate from our family life, he began, we did so believing that wealth should be a tool for good, not a measure of worth. We wanted Michael to define himself by his character, not his inheritance. He turned to me and Sophia. Today, as we celebrate your marriage, we couldn't be prouder of the choice you made, to find someone who values you for exactly who you are, not what you have. He raised his glass. May you build a life together that remains true to itself, regardless of circumstance. And may you always remember that the greatest fortune isn't measured in dollars, but in how many lives you touch for the better. As glasses raised around the room, I caught Gregory Davidson's eye. The arrogance that had so defined him at our first dinner had given way to something resembling respect, not for the Callahan wealth, but perhaps finally for the Callahan values. And that, I realized, was the point of my parents' long deception, to ensure that when the truth eventually emerged, we would all understand that true worth had nothing to do with net worth at all.